Hi, everyone. I am Sandra Crawford, the Marketing and Events Manager at Alice, which is helloalice.com, a free platform for business owners to grow and launch their companies. And today we are hosting a very special session with Rachel Drori, the founder and CEO of Daily Harvest, which is one of the fastest growing consumer brands in the US. And today we will be talking about developing brand awareness. So Rachel's going to share her expert insights to help you develop your brand awareness strategy and gain mindshare among your potential customers. So as you're tuning in here, if you'd like to add in the chat where you're joining from, that would be awesome. And you can also introduce your company. And if at any point during our session, as we're going through questions, you can add in your own questions to the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And we will be asking Rachel your questions directly so you can get some really expert insight for your business. So Rachel Drori is the founder and CEO of Daily Harvest. She created Daily Harvest as a solution to her own challenge of wanting to eat real nourishing food, but not having the time or energy to cook 3 healthy meals every day, because who of us does? So she set out to design good food that fits into real life. Daily Harvest delivers thoughtfully sourced, chef-crafted food to your door, all built on organic fruits and vegetables and ready to enjoy in minutes. Rachel has built Daily Harvest into one of the fastest growing consumer brands in the US. In December 2017, Daily Harvest announced a Series B funding round of $43 million. And today, Daily Harvest has expanded to more than 65 recipes. Rachel, would you like to give a little bit of an intro about yourself and your company?
Yeah, sure. Well, that was a great intro. But yeah, so I created Daily Harvest because I was hangry. I was working at Guilt Group at the time, and I'm sure a lot of you can appreciate this. I found that I was eating like stale cake, granola bars, and calling it lunch because I had so much to do. So, I really set out to solve the problem of really nourishing myself and others when I just didn't have the time. Like, we all know what we should be eating, but it's hard to actually eat that way when life gets busy. So that's the story of the brand, really succinctly. And about me, I'm a marketer. I started my career in marketing. I worked at Four Seasons Hotels and American Express, and then moved to Guilt Group, which was much more entrepreneurial, obviously, big company to start, and then a much smaller company where I kind of got to do everything. So I come at business from a marketing perspective, which I think is just good context.
Yeah, that's great. And Rachel is an amazing expert marketer. I think that's probably one of the reasons for Daily Harvest's great success. So we're going to dive into some questions and get really specific with tactical takeaways for you guys so that you can implement them in your businesses too. Great. So to get started, Rachel, the first question that we have is, which channels do you use to reach your target customers, and how do you decide on those?
Yeah, so we use all the channels, but the way that we go about choosing what channels and like how we went from 1 or 2 channels to multiple channels was actually very strategic. So everybody starts with digital marketing, right? You start with Instagram and Facebook because it's the most scalable, but not only because it's the most scalable, but it's also the best environment to test and learn. So what you're able to do in an environment like a Facebook or Instagram, which is the same thing, is you're able to try a ton of different messages and really understand what resonates with what audience, and then understand targeting. So it's important to start there. And then, since then we've expanded into probably 60 different channels. And the way that we've done that is really linearly. So we always start a new channel by knowing it's going to be super inefficient to start, because that's the nature of channel strategy. And we have actually a budget for this. So we have an overall marketing budget, and a percentage of that marketing budget is, we call it primordial ooze. It actually says that on our budget. It says ooze. And this ooze budget is our experimentation budgets. The idea is how much of our overall marketing budget can we use to fund really inefficient marketing spend, and then we go into a new channel with that budget, and then once it becomes efficient, we bring it into like the mothership. So that's how we've gotten into so many channels. But I mean, you name it, we are in it today.
That's amazing. So when you first started out, and just to expand on that, which channels did you start with? Was it Facebook and Instagram? And was it all organic, or did you start with some paid ads, or how did you go about that first step?
So we definitely started with organic. Instagram is a great channel for us because people eat with their eyes first. So, it's a great place to drool over yummy food. And people also go there for like recipe ideas. So for us, it was a no-brainer. And, one of the things that we did early on was, make sure that like, we always had the goal of not being solely tied to paid media because it can get really expensive. So even though we started there, which allowed us to test and learn really rigorously, as we scaled, we really thought about like what the other channels should be and like what the order of operations would be. So after Facebook and Instagram, I think we went to Pinterest, which is another good channel for us. And then from there, we attacked Google, which is, kind of a no-brainer if people are both branded and unbranded. So if people are searching for your brand name, obviously that's the most effective way to start. You can then own that traffic. But if people are searching for terms that like would lead them to your site, like for us, if people are searching for, their morning latte, how to make that easier, we would be a great search result for that. And the paid media landscape has changed. Like a lot of people are finding success in TikTok right now. Depending on what your audience is, a lot of people are thinking through like Facebook is usually a bit of an older audience, and how do you kind of span the demographics, but it just depends on really what your target is. And then once you have scale, once your marketing budget is big enough to have the percentage of the marketing budget that's your experimental budget, be able to handle other channels, then that's when you go into like podcast and direct mail and over the top, and like we just went into television, but only at this scale that where that really makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. And I love that you really laid it out from the beginning to like, as you're scaling and growing and you have more budget to spend, that's when you really start getting into those other channels as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are people that do it the other way. I just don't think that it's sustainable and you burn a lot of cash. So I try to be very capital efficient.
Right. Wondering also did you always have Daily Harvest marketing in-house, or do you use other agencies as well?
So for a very short period, we used an agency, but this is my background. So, I started it out. And then when we were kind of looking for the right people, finding talent is one of the hardest things to do. We had an agency that was great. And, then a lot of agencies are not great though. So I say that like with a lot of caution. I think, I think agencies are only as good as how well they're managed. And like you have to really manage the words that they're using and the images that they're using. And it's fine that they're deploying it and testing and learning and doing the experiments. But ultimately, like you really have to protect your brand with an agency. And then we started with our first hire, the marketing team, and now it's a pretty sizable team.
That's great. Great to hear. Yeah, because I think a lot of the founders that might be joining us today are kind of in that initial solo entrepreneurship phase where it is like a lot to tackle all at once. So how do you bring in people one at a time or outsource things as you're kind of growing there? Yeah,
I mean, I hesitate to do that too soon. I think that one of the best things that I did was really own the marketing program in the early days. So like it can seem super overwhelming, but if you actually just break it down and think about like, okay, today I'm going to try this messaging, and I'm going to try it with 16 different audiences. And they're all hypotheses based on like who you think would possibly want to buy whatever it is you're selling. And you run the test for a week and you see how it goes, and then you run another test, and then you run another test. Like if you kind of break it down into these like smaller experiments, it makes it seem less overwhelming. And then at the end of this, what you'll really know is who your exact audience is and what messaging resonates, and that allows you to go into other channels and to be able to manage an agency effectively.
That's great advice. Okay, so next question we have is, can you describe the steps you take to convert someone who's never ever heard about Daily Harvest into a customer?
Yeah, so you guys have probably heard of the marketing funnel. So it basically, if you follow the shape of a funnel, it starts out with general awareness, and there are there are some channels that are better for general awareness. And then as somebody gets down into the funnel, that's where you start using more more specific language that's really going to actually get someone to convert. So, at the top of the funnel, that's channels like, PR is the top of the funnel channel. TV is the top of the funnel channel. In the beginning stages, I would say if you're only using paid media, you can use it as top of the funnel, but it's really about like understanding the customer life cycle. So if you were using digital media as top of the funnel, the messaging would be more broad. So it is like, what is the value proposition, and what do you do that nobody else can do? So, for Daily Harvest, it's like, hey, we're going to allow you to eat the way that you've always wanted to eat, but never had the time to eat. Like that is the highest order, but that doesn't tell somebody how it works. And that's not a conversion message. And then we would retarget those people. So once we know that they have general brand awareness, then you retarget them with, this is just talking about digital media, but with a message that's like, try it today and get 3 free. So, that's where you kind of separate those messages. And it's really important that you're not trying to do everything at once. Sometimes it works to do everything at once, but it's really important to know what role each channel plays in the customer journey and make sure that you're sending the right messages at the right time and kind of like orchestrating, or choreographing is a better word, choreographing the customer journey.
That's great. And we've got a question that came in from an audience member that I'd love to ask to you. So Carol asks, what are the best platforms for advertising or building brand awareness for professional services? So a more intangible product.
It's hard to say without knowing the specific product. Do you mind,
Carol, if you're able to add into the chat a little bit more about the product? I think we've got one from her earlier that says she does translation and interpretation.
Okay, got it. So I think it's like, for me, you have to think about where people who have the need for a translation product are going to be living, right? So if it is, I don't know, because it's not a problem I've thought of, but you really have to think about like where those people are and where this message is going to resonate best. So the best example that I'm going to give is not related to what exactly you're doing, but I think it'll be really helpful. So one of the things that Hims, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Hims. You've probably seen a lot of their billboards, and they're all over the place. I think the most genius thing that they actually did was put an ad for ED on the back of a bathroom stall in men's bathrooms. So you think about like how relevant that is at the time, how relevant that ad is at the time when somebody is using the bathroom. It's really important that you kind of like get that moment in time where people are in that mindset. So what are the moments in somebody's life where they're thinking through translation and interpretation, and where is the most friction around solving that problem, and how can you speak to people in that moment?
That's great advice. Yeah, and for anyone else that has more questions, just feel free to pop those into the Q&A throughout. We'll be peppering in some of your questions as we're going through.
Yeah, and just off the top of my head, I'm kind of thinking search would probably be the best, because if somebody's trying to learn English, or if if they need translation, they would probably Google that first in their native tongue. So that would be my best guess.
Yeah. And if you are, Carol, location based, where it's not a service that's national yet, you can also, really minimize that target audience to be where you are located.
Absolutely. And you can think about, where are the places that people need that most? Is it when they're, at a doctor's office, when they're in, in a school setting? Like, I'm not sure what the setting would be, but just think about when that, the problem that you're trying to solve is most top of mind. And that's where you should be talking to your customers. So, if let's just say it was a doctor's office, I would put pamphlets or something, totally non-digital in those settings, so that when that's top of mind, there's something for that doctor to hand to a potential patient who didn't speak the language.
That's a great idea. Okay. I've got another question for you, Rachel, which is, what is your content strategy for promotion? So when you're sending out newsletters, blogs, or social posts, how do you develop your content strategy and keep it fresh?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of art and a little bit of science. So there's a lot of testing and learning that goes on with communication. It seems like, you tell your story and that's your story, but that's actually not true. And it's similar to what I said about digital media and Facebook in general, where you really have to test and be rigorous about what's resonating and what's not. So, when you're first getting your story out there, it's like, okay, so here are 5 different variables that I can put together to to tell this story, right? So you've got subject lines, which are different from headlines, which are different from the photography that you have in there, which is different from the story inside, and you might have 5 different versions of the story that you're trying to tell in that specific email. I think it's really important to understand the purpose of every channel that you're communicating through, but then, really testing it out. So, similar to what I said about paid media, if you are, trying to tell a story on a blog, or if you were trying to send an email, or trying to, have, optimize your About Us page, all of those things I would do through testing and understanding the actual results. And what you can learn from that is, if you have 2 emails and the click-through rate is better on one than the other, that tells you that one subject line is stronger. And then if you understand, open rate, and then click-through rate tells you something else, and you can understand which piece of the email people are clicking on. So then you understand how far they're scrolling and where their engagement is. So, I think that the most important thing about content strategy is really understanding the role of each piece that you're putting out there and what story you're trying to tell, where in the funnel somebody's hitting it. Is this top of the funnel where you're telling a more general brand story, or is this a conversion? Is this a conversion channel? And, just test the heck out of it.
Really great advice there. I think also one of the other things to keep in mind is, how do you keep your brand consistent across those channels, whether they're digital, the various digital channels, or also out in the offline world? How does Daily Harvest do that?
Yeah, so that's super hard, especially as a business is scaling, let me tell you. But, we have a bunch of brand guides that are really important. So, one from a tone of voice and a visual perspective, but also what we want our customers to be feeling and thinking at every point through the customer journey. So, there's the normal brand guide, which is our font is this, and this is the type of photography we use, and there has to be X amount of white space, and this is our tone of voice. But then there's the other piece that a lot of people forget, which is that customer journey piece. So, I think it is really understanding not only what people need to hear, what people want to hear, what you want people to hear, but also connecting the emotional, less quantitative pieces to it, and making sure that that is also consistent. I want a customer every time they have a touch with Daily Harvest to feel hungry. I don't know, and that's important.
Yeah. That makes sense. So it's a mix of the visual and the tone and how the actual brand feels, looks, everything is all in one, and it's something to keep consistent across all channels.
Yeah, and like it evolves over time, but I think it's really important to get it out on paper, because then if you have designers, or even if you have, you know, a digital marketing agency, to what we were talking about before, it's important that everybody's on the same page, and that's how you build brand consistency.
That's great. I'm wondering if you can also speak to how those channels might need the tone, or what's actually the content of the ad, or reaching out. How does it differ between the different channels?
Yeah. So, you know, again, it depends on where in the funnel it is. So I would say something higher in the funnel is like just to get somebody's attention and just to give them like the highest order message, which is, we're going to solve a life problem for you. So, you know, depending if that's like a prospect email, it will be about that same message. And what do you want the customers to feel? You want them to feel like relief or whatever it is. So that's consistent through every channel that's getting that top of funnel messaging. And then as you go down the funnel, it's more about, you know, getting people to actually take out their credit card and pay for something. So, you know, to do that, that tone might be a little different. You might need a little carrot. So it goes from like, okay, I'm going to assume that you know what Daily Harvest is, or you know what my business is. So we're not going to talk about that anymore. I'm going to show you a picture that is going to make you hungry, and I'm going to give you a deal you can't refuse.
Mm-hmm. And it's really like getting that call to action,
Yes.
Specific for where they are in the funnel.
Yes.
Awesome. We had a question come in from one of our attendees, which is, how do you continue to keep promotions interesting and get a consistent flow of new customers to keep returning?
Yeah. So I think that that's in the targeting. So like we still have messaging and photography and ads that from the very beginning have just worked. But it's really about how you go through your audience and how you form lookalikes. So you start with, you know, from that early testing, which audience this resonates most with. And then that evolves over time, and you're like, okay, well, I feel like we've kind of penetrated this audience, so I'm going to go to another audience, and then I'm going to build a lookalike off the other audience. But the only way to know is through testing and learning. So, you know, if in the early days, I was pretty disciplined about spending some weeks on targeting new audiences, where like my entire time was like testing and learning and developing strategies for the next phase. And then, you know, the other weeks it would be about like optimizing the ones that are in market, and like moving spend around. So, you know, I think it really like depends on, you know, what works. And then I'd say, you know, photography styles change over time. What resonates with people, people get jaded. People are like, you know, I'm sick of all this clickbait. I'm like moved on. So I think it's also just having a really, like overall awareness of what's going on in social media. So like right now, people are getting into this like collage look and feel of ads. And like, that's what's really resonating with customers. Whereas like, you know, stuff on pedestals is what worked a year ago.
Right. So once you find something that does work, do you at Daily Harvest turn that into an evergreen campaign that's like constantly bringing new people into your funnel?
Yeah. So something is only evergreen until it stops working.
Yeah.
So, you know, we do have ads that from the very beginning have been stars for us, but then, you know, we have some that'll work for 3 months and then they'll stop working. We have some that'll work for a year and then they'll stop working. It just depends. And like, you know, before you like retire something, you should always test it against new audiences just to make sure that your hypothesis about maybe exhausting a creative is true. It can just be within a specific target audience, but you know, I think it's really important to always be testing new things, like even if you have 5 things that are working, because what works today might not work tomorrow.
That's great advice. Do you find that once you're if you're sunsetting an evergreen campaign, or not evergreen, how early do you find out that you might need to do that? Are you checking daily or hourly or weekly?
Yeah,
like
no,
what's the time frame for like
I mean,
checking
look,
those?
when it was just me, you only have so much time in a day, but like your marketing spend is how you're bringing customers in, and it's super important. And, the other thing that I should have mentioned earlier on is it's also really important to invest in organic channels earlier on. So, referral channels and, thinking about like how you create almost like a virtuous marketing cycle for the brand so that you're not only just spending to acquire customers. And I can talk more on that. But as far as like, ads that might time out or, not be relevant anymore, you have to check on it daily. And that's why people hire agencies, because if you're not checking on it daily, you can miss, like your CAC can double overnight, and that's just not good.
Mm-hmm. That's really important to keep in mind. So you talked a little bit just now about referral marketing or other kind of organic, non-paid channels. Can you expand upon that a little?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of ways to do it. There's like the traditional refer a friend program, which doesn't really work as well as it used to. But the thing that has evolved over the past few years is really how you go from making somebody feel like they are like trying to get something from a friend, because that is not going to work, as opposed to like making the referrer feel like they are giving the referee a gift and getting something in return for their trouble. So there's like a bit of a mindset shift that's happened over the past few years, which has been interesting. But every product is different, and you just have to think about what really works for you. But I think it's like the idea of putting yourself into the shoes of the referrer, because that's the most important person here, and saying like, what's actually going to make me share this is really important. We used to do a ton of seeding where we would send a ton of stuff to, not people with huge followings, but people who had like, 10, 20,000 followers on Instagram. And they would just post organically, which was, it still happens, which, is always a really great result to see. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to do it. PR is obviously huge, but also hard to get.
Yeah. So on that note, what was your media and influencer strategy when you first launched in 2015? And what is it like today?
Yeah, so when we first launched, it was exactly as I said, it was a ton of seeding. So we would just send boxes to everyone. But it was also a different time. So it was a time when like people would post for nothing. Now that isn't so much the case. So, I think it's more about relationship building than anything else. And if you are really building relationships with influencers, and obviously like you have to start somewhere. So it starts with sending them a gift. But, after that, it's like, check in. Hey, how'd you like it? What'd you think? Do you have any suggestions? And I think that starts to actually build a relationship. Whereas a lot of people are like, I'm just going to pay you and you're going to post. Customers see right through that if it's not genuine. So, I think it's really important to actually like have fewer people, but actually like build relationships in the community among them, and have them, give their opinions and their thoughts, and have them be a part of the journey, as opposed to like a service. Nobody wants to be like a service. And I think the other thing is there are some larger influencers that you do pay for play. That's just like the nature of the business. But I haven't found them effective recently at all. I think that Instagram is tinkering with the algorithms, and I think that influencers, I don't know how they know, but like paid ads, and I guess because they have to write ad in the hashtag, are definitely being deprioritized, because I think Facebook's going to figure out how to make a cut.
Oh, interesting.
That's my hypothesis. Yeah.
So do you target right now kind of still those smaller influencers with 10 to 20,000 followers?
Yeah, I think it's so much more effective and it can be more genuine, and it's like, it's really about relationship building.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about still kind of on the influencer side, you've got some really big names backing your company.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how did you establish the relationships to get Serena Williams and Bobby Flay to invest in Daily Harvest?
Yeah.
And did the value of their celebrity, that their celebrity could bring the brand, factor into pursuing those relationships?
Yeah. So Serena was an interesting one. That was just pure luck. I mean, her now husband just called me one day, and I didn't know who he was. I didn't know who his girlfriend was. I was like, and by the time I figured it out, my jaw was like dropped to the floor, and I was like, I don't even know what's happening. Somebody pinched me. So that was more luck. But I think some of the other celebrity influencers that we have came from actually raising around and opening it up through calling it talent agencies. Most talent agencies have a venture side, and really like understanding what sort of businesses work for the clients that they have, because it is in it is in the talent agency's best interest to bring deals to their clients because it makes them look good.
Mm-hmm.
So going that way and giving people an opportunity, like startups are so it's like a way to diversify your capital. So I think people get excited when they hear about something early on. It feels like they have an opportunity to be a part of something. And, again, it's about relationship building with those people. And then as far as like what the benefit of it has been, I'd say they're really nice people. I really like them. But, I'd say where it's helped most is probably with press. So like if it's between you and somebody else who have the chance for a headline, and like Serena Williams' name can be in that headline, they will usually go with you because that helps them meet their goals, where they want clickbait to get their ad numbers up. So it's this like virtuous cycle where you just like it. Honestly, the key here is just always thinking about what is going to motivate, like how you intrinsically motivate the right people.
Mm-hmm. So when you're, for a new founder starting out, if they reached out to a talent agency to try to get a celebrity that might endorse their brand or partner with them in some way, what could they be expecting to spend for that?
So we didn't spend anything. They're investors.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my hunch is that some celebrities will probably be just excited to invest if they feel connected enough to the mission. But some are probably at this point looking for like free equity. So I think it just depends on who you are interested in and like how aligned they are with the mission.
Okay, great to know. So moving on from the influencer side, we've got a question from RP who asks, is there a suggested dollar amount to start marketing with? So for the founders in the very early stages.
Yeah. So I'm going to overcomplicate this, but I think it's an important thing to say. So for me, I always look at ROI, right? So that means that I take the LTV, like how much I expect a customer to spend over their lifetime. And in the beginning, you're like that sounds right. You make a guess, and it's an educated guess, and it's your best. It's like, common sense. I think this service will be useful to somebody 3 times a year, and I think that they will stick around for 2 years on average, or I don't know. And you figure out what the dollar amount is of their entire lifetime with the company. And then for me, I like to think of a 3x ROI as like a really good measure. It's like a really good benchmark to think about success through. So if you say like, okay, I need to acquire, let's say 10,000 customers in a year, right? So you multiply 10,000 times the projected LTV of those customers, and then you divide by 3. And then you divide by how many customers you needed to acquire. And that is the CAC that you should be okay with spending. And, if you don't divide by the number of customers, that's the budget that you should be okay with spending.
Okay. So just for some of our listeners who might not know, would you mind just telling us what all those acronyms mean? So CAC, LTV.
CAC, sorry, I do this.
No worries. I think it's It's just all people are at different stages. So it's good to.
Of course. So CAC is the cost to acquire a customer. So that's what you end up paying Facebook. And then the LTV, as I said, is the lifetime spend of a customer that you are anticipating over like people usually use a 3-year horizon. And then ROI is the CAC in the numerator and LTV in the denominator, and it's a math problem. And then if it is 3 or higher, that is like really good. I wouldn't expect to be there early on. Maybe you start at a 2x and then aspire for the 3x. As you're kind of building efficiencies and trying to understand what messages resonate, you're going to have to do a lot of testing, and that testing is inefficient and more expensive. But I think it's like just a good benchmark to be aware of and to know where you're aspiring to.
Okay, great. And just to reiterate, so that means your ROI, your return on investment, you're shooting for that to equal your lifetime value of your customer divided by the cost of acquisition to be 3. That's like the ideal. And it's okay if you're not there to start with.
We weren't.
What could people expect to start with, do you think, when they're first launching their brand?
2 is like a really good early stage benchmark, but I would just make sure that you have a path to 3. I think from an investor perspective, I'm about to go on a tangent, I'm sorry. They think about their cost of capital and the company's cost of capital. It's like all tied to what the return needs to be. So 3x is like a pretty good bar if you're going out to raise a round beyond like an A.
Okay, great. I wonder also if you have any advice for someone who has maybe low or zero budget.
Yeah.
How can they get started marketing? What kind of channels might they explore that don't require any money?
Yep. So we had 0 budget when we started, so I totally get it. So we thought about like how we could be really scrappy and showed up a lot at events. It was a lot of sampling and then a lot of organic social. So getting my friends to post, and just like creating that groundswell. Showing up in real life and talking to people about it. I think that you can also, like with very little money, start to understand, start to like test messaging through Facebook. So you don't need a lot to be able to do that. You really don't. It's just a great way, even if you're never even planning on acquiring a customer through that channel, just to understand messaging and the audience, because what that helps you do is then figure out, okay, so, if what I understand from Facebook is that, my customers have an affinity for yoga, like I can then show up at a yoga studio. Or there's a lot of guesswork that can be done without, paid media, where you just do that experimentation in real life, and you go to, you go to a yoga studio, and then you can go to a, I don't know, like a doctor's office and see what works better.
Mm-hmm. And do you also use any surveys or other kind of like, not through social analytics, but other ways to maybe find out, is this resonating or not?
Yeah, so I don't believe in surveys, which is like pretty controversial. I just think people aren't always, they don't know what they want in the survey, and they don't know what they don't know in a survey. So I think that they're inherently a little bit biased. But that's just my opinion. People love surveys. I don't like them. What I think is really important is following people who follow you. So, if you can build an organic social following all of your followers, and also following the hashtags that show up around your business, or even businesses that are similar to yours, because what that'll do is that'll tell you a little bit about the people who your message is resonating with, who your mission is resonating with. And then you can do Insta stalking. We're all good at that, right? Like, so, you just figure out, I'm just going to go back to yoga. Oh, interesting. Like, it looks like a lot of my customers are yoga instructors, or like, go to yoga. So maybe that's a good place to start, and you just follow the clues.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. 'Cause there was, this reminds me of a question that was asked recently in one of the Alice communities, where someone was asking about their online business. They haven't launched their first product yet. And they've done surveys of, would you buy this? Would you buy it for this price? And then they weren't actually really feeling like the results were accurate. So they set up a early stage page where they could do pre-orders and actually get, that transaction going to see. You can always say in a survey, right, that you'll buy something for $15, but will you actually put the money down? And that's what they need to know, right?
Yep. So, and that's why I say it's so important to actually test and learn as opposed to ask and hypothesize. Because if you don't get out there and you're not like actually making people make like real decisions where there are real like credit cards on the line, it's not real.
Right. Okay, shifting gears here a little bit. I want to talk about the new Bites collection that you launched for Daily Harvest for snack time. Can you walk us through the steps you took to launch this new product with the brand that already exists?
Yeah, so because we are a direct-to-consumer brand and because I don't like surveys, what we've done is we've built a very test-based culture, but we've also built this community among our devotees that have created this like constant customer communication. And that's been, I think, really important to our success. And the Bites actually came directly from that. So what we heard from our customers was that, they loved everything that we had, but around 3:00 every day, they were in the middle of like 16 things. It wasn't really a mealtime. They wanted something they could just grab and pop in their mouth. And we were like, we got you. So what we did then is actually through social media, so I said I don't like surveys, but I actually like Instagram polls because I think that they're at least directionally helpful. I wouldn't make like huge business decisions based on them, but at least it's directional. So then we asked people, at 3:00, what do you crave most? And it was chocolate, like obviously.
Yep, that's true for me.
Yeah. So, that's one of the ways that we validated our hypothesis. And then what we were able to do is like, the customers that we talk to all the time through different social channels and through, people who write in, is we just asked them, we said, hey, like if we were to launch something like this, does this sound like something that you would want? I think people are often afraid to talk to their customers. It feels like there's this like wall that you don't want to break, but I think that that's a really antiquated way of thinking about it. We talk to our customers all the time and they co-create with us in like a really real way. So, our Bites came from this insight that our customers had that was like, hey, I really need something for 3:00 and I don't want to do anything. So don't make me blend, don't make me heat it, just let me put it in my mouth and be really happy. So that's where they came from. And then, as we have been gathering early feedback from them, what we're able to do because of the way that we're built is we can hear in real time, well, did we get it right? So, our customers say, oh, it's a little too sweet. It's a little too chocolatey. I taste the avocado a little too much. And then we just change it.
Mm-hmm. And that really promotes a lot of brand loyalty too, I imagine, with those customers.
Absolutely. And it really helps form those bonds where then people trust that when they give us their thoughts, we're going to respond to it. So they tell us more.
Great. That's really great. So we've got a question here from Shani who asks, how effective are trials and promotions? So I guess in that like new product zone, how effective do you find trials or promotions for, a sale or something like that?
Yeah, so I think it's I have a lot of opinions. So I think it depends on what you're trying to sell. I think some things lend themselves more to trial than other things. So it's a little difficult to say, but I don't love promotions. So like, I think about something that is part of a CTA is different from a promotion. Like we give everybody who comes to our site 3 free. Like that is just part of our conversion. It's our cost of doing business because it helps people get through that funnel. But I think that once you start doing like real promotions all the time, it's training people that they should expect promotions. And then you have trouble. I mean, poor J. Crew and Gap, like people just wait for the sale. So I think it's important to be disciplined like that, where it can be really tempting to constantly do promotions. And I believe in giving something to help somebody get through the funnel, but I would just be careful with constantly having different promotions be associated with a brand.
Yeah, I think we saw that especially with JCPenney too, when they really had to backtrack on not having sales anymore and bring them back because people were like, this is what your brand is, right? So it changes the way people perceive your brand for sure.
It totally does. And it's okay to do it every once in a while. Like every Cyber Monday, we do like a buy one, get one box, and it's really successful. And those customers end up being great customers. So, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And so speaking of that, do you do annual things around the holidays for Daily Harvest promotions? And that's definitely something that a lot of our small business audience asks about is, how should they prepare for the holidays and what kind of campaigns should they run? It's obviously a very busy time also to get the attention of the customer because there's so many other things going on.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to that hymns example because I think it's genius. I think it is really like what is unique about what you are selling and where is a unique place to stand out. Because just paying to play in like a very noisy time of year, everyone loses. It's like mutual assured destruction. So, I think it's really about like how you're going to be differentiated. For the holidays, we do these like gorgeous gift boxes that have straws in them, and we charge the same as a regular gift card. But like, if you're deciding between a gift card that is like just a gift card in an envelope versus something that has a beautiful presentation, like what's going to look better under the tree? So these are the things that we think through. And then from like an acquisition perspective, like, it's really figuring out where you can stand out in the crowd. And it is hard to figure it out. But if you're always thinking about the customer perspective, not the behavior that you want the customer to have, but like what they actually have, and talk to people, say like, talk to 5 customers and say, where do you shop over the holidays? Like, where do you wish we were? You'll get a lot of really good answers.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I think it's definitely, it depends a lot on what the product is and where your audience is. So I like that. Talk to your customers, find out what they want, and then help deliver on that.
Well, it's okay. It's actually a really good thing.
Yeah. Okay, so a lot of what we've talked through so far has been really digital based. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering what offline events or tactics do you use to build Daily Harvest brand awareness?
Yeah, so Daily Harvest in particular is a little tricky offline because we're frozen. So it's somewhere where I wish we were able to play more, but we have definitely done a bunch of sampling. And then, I'm going to go back to the same thing. It's really about like place and time and like the customer journey. So, where does a customer really need a bite at 3:00, right? So is it in the office? Probably. Okay. So, we did a bunch of office drops and we, just found office managers on LinkedIn and sent them a note and said, hey, we'd love to do a 3:00 snack break. Great. But that's specific to us. So I think it's really just about like, again, that customer journey and continuing to ask questions and talk to your customers and find out where they want you to be. Like where it's not only what problem you're solving, but where are you solving that problem, and be there.
Yeah, that's great advice. I also want to ask this question. We kind of touched on it earlier before, but so you have an MBA in marketing and management from Columbia, and you've had years of experience in marketing before you started Daily Harvest.
Yep.
So a 2-part question. So how has this proved an advantage to you in your company as a founder? And what would you suggest to founders who might not have as much experience in this critical area?
Yeah. So look, every founder has an unfair advantage in some area. It's either you've got vision like nobody else, you've got a marketing background, you've got a finance background, like everyone has something that they are unfairly poised to excel in. But, I think that for me, having a marketing background allowed us to create a really strong brand identity. And, you know, I was really rigorous and consistent with it. So it created this, like, yeah, I mean, it's a brand identity. And also, you know, while I had dabbled in the digital world, you know, there's nothing like doing it yourself. So, you know, I had worked in environments where we had agencies, like I was never on the ground doing it. So while I knew the framework, like I didn't really know how to do it. So I think just testing and learning and like not being hard on yourself is the most important thing that you can do, where, you know, like you have to be okay with failure, and you also have to fail really fast. So what I've always done is I break things out into tiny little experiments that where like the consequences aren't that big if it fails. So, you know, being disciplined, like saying, okay, this week I'm going to focus on a new channel, or this week I'm going to focus on a new audience, and I'm going to figure that one out. And then the next week you do another one. If something fails, it's like, it's a week of work. It's not that big of a deal. I think is really important. But, you know, I think as far as like, you know, not having a marketing background, I don't think you need it. I think you just really need to be like disciplined, and a lot of it is common sense. It's like, you know, who wants this? How am I going to get it to them? What are the right channels? You know, and how do I test in a really scrappy way to understand like if I'm onto something or if I've got it wrong, and how do I do that really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
And then I pivot as soon as I realize something's not working.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Something else that I would add too is a lot of founders, or kind of pre-founders when they're still in the idea stage, will end up partnering with a co-founder who maybe complements their experience. So say you are an expert in finance, you might partner with someone who's an expert in marketing. So then you can both kind of drive those two expertises forward.
Absolutely. But I also, even if you do have that co-founder, I think getting dirty with it, like I always tell people, don't just go to an agency, because you're not going to learn enough, and then the agency is not going to do a good job, and you're not even going to know the difference. Like, it is really important, I think, that you get your hands dirty throughout the entire supply chain and marketing, like start to finish, in every piece.
Yeah, every piece of the business.
You need to be an expert, but I think you need to understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the really cool things that founders get is they get the experience in every single aspect of the business.
Yep.
And they become that much more of an expert.
Totally. Oops. Sorry.
We've got a question here. We've got a couple more minutes, so I'm going to open it up to all audience questions from here on out. So make sure you add yours to the Q&A if you haven't already. Crystal Scott asks, but first she says, Rachel, thank you for being here. And she has a question regarding pricing. How did you set your pricing initially, and how do you use the price to market your product?
Yeah, so this was not scientific. This was definitely more art. I looked around at like what the alternatives were. So, you know, somebody could go to a smoothie bar, somebody could go to a salad bar and buy the things that we were offering. So what did they cost? And I made sure that I wasn't just checking in New York, because we're national. So I called a bunch of friends who lived in different cities, and I said, hey, like, you know, go to the coffee shop on the corner and bring me back data. And then I tried to figure out like, what is the value of Daily Harvest, right? So we are like the value to a customer. So, you know, in a major urban area, somebody is probably a little less price sensitive and has a smaller freezer than somebody who is in the rural suburbs, right? So, you know, using that information, I was able to take my best guess at pricing. And then once we had enough customers to like have the ability to look at things and have them be statistically significant, we did some elasticity work. So it's basically like a survey that you send out. And again, I said I hate surveys, but for pricing, it actually works. So, you know, you then understand like what somebody is willing to pay. I think we did it's called a conjoint analysis. I think that's which one we did. And like, you can hire somebody to do that for you, but I wouldn't start there. I would really just get it out into the market and test. And actually, to what you spoke about earlier, where you can build a site, you can build three sites that look exactly the same and do 3 different wait lists, and send traffic to 3 different places and see which one wins, which gets the most people on a wait list. Like, there's lots of scrappy ways to do it. You can do the same thing with a Facebook ad, see which one gets the most click-throughs. There's lots of ways to kind of get at it. But I would say I wouldn't do any sort of surveying until much later on.
Okay.
Like, just get something out there, make your best guess, and see if it works. If it doesn't, make it lower. Or talk to people and say, why isn't this working? And if they say, oh, I feel like it's cheap because the price is too low, then you know what to do.
Yeah. That's really important. And that testing mindset and data-driven decisions is really going to set you apart as well, I think.
Totally.
We've got a couple of questions that came in that are a little bit more about your life as a founder.
Yeah.
So Hannah asks, how do you stay motivated to hustle your way through the hard times as a startup founder?
Yeah. So being a founder is really hard. If it were easy, a lot more people would do it. We are masochists of sorts. It's really hard. And I'm a single founder. I do not have a co-founder. But there are major ups and downs. And, what I always like to think about is like the upward slope. If you kind of normalize those peaks and troughs, and you just like say, like, over time, am I going in the upward direction, like upwards and to the right, then like you're going to be fine. And just remember that for every low, there's going to be a high, and for every high, there's going to be a low. And I think it like kind of keeps you centered. But I mean, this is really hard. And, I've hit some of my highest highs and some of my lowest lows in the past 3 years. I also think it's like, it's making sure that you have a good support system. Like, there's only so much you're gonna tell somebody on your team about, when something's like really bad, and you're like, I'm like the founder, I have to like wear this on my shoulders. You don't. It's okay to talk to friends. It's okay to, there are founder meetup groups, and meet people who are going through a lot of the same things at the same stage. It sounds like, Alice is one of those great ones. So, just don't be afraid to like talk about the highs and the lows, because beyond a shadow of a doubt, like whoever you talk to is going to say same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think mental health is so important to keep in mind for founders. It is a really stressful thing to be doing, right? Running a startup. And we do have a lot of resources on mental health on helloalice.com. So just a little plug there.
Family too. And, I think the other advice that I would give is, instead of thinking about this ideal of having it all, you can't have it all. It's not possible. So like, how do you think about having it all over time? Like right now I'm focused on daily harvest, and like, I will have time for me at some point in the future. I hope.
Yeah. And keeping that kind of future mindset as part of your day-to-day. One last one, really quickly, which is similar. How do you motivate your employees as a founder?
Yeah. So instead of it's not that simple. So I'd say I kind of like break it out into 2 buckets. So one, it depends on who you hire. You have to hire the right people. If they don't believe in the mission, then what's going on? Oh, there's a birthday right outside. I'm like, what is that noise? If they don't believe in your mission, and they're not like, just totally on board for the journey, then it's going to be hard to keep people motivated, especially when you're in those low points. You would need to find people who are just like going to make this work, whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say the other thing is really giving people ownership. So, like, while yes, I am the founder and I have a lot of ideas and I have a lot of like vision and an idea about how things should happen, if I just dictated to people, what they would do all day, people wouldn't be motivated. And this for me is like the difference between a boss and a leader. Like, I don't love the phrase like girl boss, because I feel like that is like a dictator. Whereas if you're leading and like, lifting people up to do their best work, that's what really motivates them.
Yeah, that is wonderful advice. All right, well, we are at the top of the hour here. I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in today or watching this recording after. And Rachel, just thank you so much for your time and your insights. This has been a really, really amazing discussion, and I feel like we've got a ton of different tactical takeaways that people can use for their companies now.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks so much. And you can catch the recording of this session and a few others that we have coming up. You can register for at helloalice.com and join the Role Breakers community there, and you'll get looped into all the announcements for those. So thank you again, Rachel. Thanks everyone for joining.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Thanks for the questions.